Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Talking the Red. This is Wes, and today we're going to be discussing the Savage version of Eden's Gate Inundation. You guys know it as Leviathan Savage, or E3S. This is a pretty fun fight in my opinion, but it can be very, very tricky for red mages, especially for your first couple of tries. A lot of movement, a lot of places where you can just kind of go ham and burst DPS, followed immediately by a lot of movement where it can be kind of tricky to figure out what exactly you're supposed to be doing. So we'll go ahead and take a look at it without any further ado. So we go ahead and get started here with our cooldown. One thing you'll notice me doing in this video that's a little bit different is I actually have started using the option in your target settings to face target when using an action. I actually had that off for a lot of my previous videos, and it turns out it's a pretty big DPS boost, especially on fights with a lot of movement like this, where you can be turning a lot and can really end up clipping a lot of global cooldowns because you're trying to get into position. So you'll start seeing me use that quite a bit for upcoming videos. So we go ahead and get started into our first melee combo here. Mechanics-wise, he's not too bad. I honestly think this is a little bit easier than Voidwalker, but this is definitely a fight with a lot of very fast cast timers where you have to really kind of pay attention. It's also a fight I've noticed from a lot of high-end red mages that really rewards very risky play, and I'll kind of explain that in a second as we get into our first Quake here. So yeah, a lot of high-end red mages I've seen are playing it very risky. You know, they're really riding that line of whether or not they can fit in an extra cast or whether or not they're going to get clipped by a mechanic and end up wiping the raid. But it can be a lot of fun if you are comfortable doing it. So this first one, they don't drop puddles. You'll probably be in your melee combos, you can see there for that first one. So you can go ahead and stay mid right there, close to him without having to get into position. Later on, he is going to drop puddles, and it's very important that you do remember your position. Don't forget it just because you're trying to fit in those extra casts for that first one. My DPS for this fight was pretty middle of the road. This particular pool was quite a bit higher than my previous ones, but yeah, it's around 50 percentile. Pretty good for my data center, but you know, very middle of the road as far as overall red mage goes. But like I said, you know, this series is all about, you know, improving a little bit and showing you guys the fight from a red mage perspective. So alright, so we get in here. I'm using Addle quite a bit in this fight, as you'll see. I find that it does help out quite a bit to try and keep some DPS off of the tanks there. Alright, so he's going into his first Tsunami. Now, I've noticed a lot of Party Finder groups get very intimidated by this fight because of mechanics like Tsunami. It can look like there's a lot going on, but when you really break it down, even though it's good to know everything that all the moves do, you really only have to worry about your one or two mechanics at any given time. You know, for that first Tsunami, the only thing you really have to notice is whether or not you have the line AoE. If you don't, then just, you know, stay where you're at and then let everyone else deal with their own mechanics. Tsunami 2, the kind of really confusing one coming up here in a little bit, it's the same thing. You know, there's several different debuffs you can get, but once you know which one you have, then you know what to do for that fight. Everyone else needs to worry about their own. One of the kind of cool things with this fight is it's very big on personal responsibility. It's not like the previous Savages where, you know, there's a whole lot of raid-wide mechanics that everyone kind of has to pay attention to at the same time. This one, it's more based on your personal performance and making sure that you know what you need to do. There's a lot of mechanics that can wipe a raid, but you don't have to necessarily pay attention to what everyone else is doing at the same time. Once you can kind of get into that mindset, like I said, I think this is actually an easier fight mechanics-wise than the previous one. Alright, so he's going to get into his refreshing shower right here. All of his mechanics from this point forward are going to be doubling up, so we need to pay attention and remember that as we get started. Also from this point, those positions that we had shown a little bit earlier, we are going to need to be in our spots for that because puddles will drop from here on out. Alright, so he's going to be getting into his next Quake right here, and go ahead and use my Sure Cast in the middle of the combo. You know, thankfully this fight is not super RNG dependent. There's not a whole lot of random variables for it. All of his mechanics are pretty set. like this right here is about as random as it's going to get. Which corners you go into and which debuff do you get. That's about as RNG as you'll find. All right, so get into my position here. And this is one of those spots where, you know, if you're really doing well and you're very comfortable with what you're doing, you're going to be able to fit an extra melee combo in here. So you'll see it pop up here in just a second. A lot of players, if you're running a little bit behind, you're not going to be able to fit it because he is going to be able to disappear into his second Maelstrom combo here in just a second. But if you're on point and you've been doing good with your casts, and then sure enough, as you can see, we've got more than enough time to core up to him and get into positions for Maelstrom too. All right. A good point to pop your Lucid Dreaming, even if you're already pretty high on mana. I mean, this is such a long phase that might as well get those extra mana points in. All right. And at this point, I'm going to be popping my second potion here in just a moment. This is probably the first really tricky part for red mages because of all the movement involved. We're going to be moving as a group for Stormy Horizon, and this is really one of those spots that I was talking about that really rewards very high-risk play, but if you mess up, then you're going to be going down here. These puddles, they look like they go very quickly, but they're actually kind of like E1S's puddles, where it's actually a fairly long cast time. I accidentally clipped it there, but I definitely could have gotten off that jolt too. So feel free to, you know, slow down for a moment and get an extra cast off. The third puddle tends to be the most popular spot. It's a very nice little comfort area where you should be able to get an extra cast off and then slide cast with your dual cast here. Same thing with his corner strikes. A lot of the tie-in red mages are able to fit in an extra cast before you have to start moving from corner to corner too. Unfortunately, I didn't do it on this portion, but if you are really comfortable, you can definitely do it. All right, so here in a moment, we're going to be getting back into our positions as he gets ready for another Quake that's going to knock off the sides of the arena here. All right, Drenching Pulse. And there we go. Thankfully, my core is going to be up just in time, so once the puddle goes away, you can just get right back there to center without having to worry about running too much. You know, the less you have to run in this fight, the better, the more casts you're going to be able to get off. I know it can seem very tricky. It's almost the opposite of Voidwalker. A lot of very fast cast timers. It can feel very intimidating trying to slow down a bit. So here, like I said, T2 is really not bad. Again, there's a lot of mechanics going on, but you really only have to worry about which one you personally have. You know, I had the first pulse. From that point on, it's just a matter of getting into position. I don't have to worry about the lasers or who's got the next two line AoEs. Once I'm done, I'm done. Same thing, you know, if you do get these lines, just pay attention to that one mechanic you have to worry about. Here, it can be very easy to forget, though, that giant wave coming from behind, the tank AoE. I messed up quite a bit early on in this fight when I was still learning it and tried moving back into the center, forgetting he's going to do the corner strikes. Don't make that mistake. There's going to be a giant AoE behind you coming from the tank, so. Alright, so that went pretty smoothly. And honestly, it's not too bad for red mages either. There's more than enough time to get off. Plenty of casts during Tsunami too. I've also noticed, see here, we're just now popping our limit break. It's actually a little late in my opinion. If your cast bars are up high enough, you can definitely get a limit break 3 off as he's casting Tsunami 2. I've actually seen that probably more often in Party Finder groups than waiting until here. Now, coming up is going to be the other really tricky part for red mages with all the timing involved. This is Black Smokers. It can be very frustrating. For this portion, there is a lot of personal responsibility. More than likely, unless you just luck into a group with 3 ranged, you are probably going to be taking one of the tethers here. It's usually the 2 ranged that are going to be doing that. But because the cast time on these puddles is very quick, it can feel very difficult trying to fit in an extra cast or 2 as you get ready here. I do an in pattern. It's very important to make sure that you're not popping your party members here. They'll get knocked off the platform and take a massive amount of damage, and yeah, it's just bad. It can be very, very frustrating to get to this point and then end up wiping because you didn't drop the puddles correctly. Again, it is your responsibility as a red mage to be able to do that. So, if there's any portion of this fight that you really want to get some practice on, it's going to be black smokers. All right. And then from here on out, it's pretty simple. Just a lot of raid-wide damage going out. Thankfully, we had plenty of DPS for this fight. Our Dragoon Jericho right there was pulling close to 15k, so we were more than fine on his end. Pop my last potion right there, and I was pulling around 11.5, which, like I said, is very middle of the road. Now, it's good for my data center, but like I said, only about 50 percentile for overall red mages. But I'm pretty happy with it. It's a lot better than my previous ones. Here we go. I think his overall damage that you need is 71.6k. As far as raid DPS goes, I've had quite a few runs where we actually killed him as his enrage animation was going off. You do have a little bit of leeway once that cast timer finishes. You have to wait for him to actually do his circle around the arena before his enrage goes off. But it can be very tight. Beyond that, though, there's E3S. I hope that gives you guys a pretty decent look. Like I said, I think it's one of the more fun Savage fights. But I know a lot of party finder groups have had a lot of trouble with this. I've noticed in my discords and whatnot that people are really struggling with some of these mechanics. Like I said, it's just a matter of kind of taking a step back and really just kind of paying attention to what you personally need to focus on. And again, as far as DPS uptime goes, it's just really getting comfortable with being able to fit in those extra casts and really playing it very, very risky. But it can be a lot of fun when you do so. Beyond that, once you get it done, like I said, I think it's easier than E2S, and after that, you're ready for Titan. So, as always, thanks for watching. Let me know if you guys have any particular strategies or red mage play that you've has found works for you down in the comments. Beyond that, have a good one, and I will see you next time.